Hi Wildcats, I'm Jessica Kalk and we're here with WBN. Recently, we had asked some students to put in some questions that they would have asked by the admin, so we are here today with Mr. Shumaker. Mr. Shumaker, introduce yourself.
It's a pleasure as principal to represent the admin team and answer some of these questions.
All right, so we'll start off with this one. A student had asked if we have suggestions for Wilsonville High School, where do we go?
So I think that a student who has a suggestion can start with any adult in the building. So and sometimes it's a matter of who you have a relationship with. So if you are feel really close to a teacher, you want to go to the teacher. That teacher might send you to one particular administrator over another. Like Mr. Burke, for instance, does more facility things than I do. Mrs. Gregg does more curriculum, particularly in a couple of departments, so it kind of depends on what the question is. But if you start with any adult in the building or a counselor, you'll get the right place.
And that leads me to my next question. We had a question say, can we talk to anyone at any time? So would you suggest a teacher you're comfortable with and counselors and that?
Yeah, I would. And the counselors are pretty good about making sure one of them is available, maybe not be your counselor if it's really something you need to talk about. At the worst with the counselors, you're going to leave a note and someone's going to get back to you.
Perfect, thank you. The next question we had is, what kind of degree/education do you have to be in education administration?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool to see some education questions in there from people who are interested in that. And as a district, we're talking more about having pathways in high schools where students can be more aware of what some of the coursework could lead to, rather than just coming to high school and saying, I want my credits. You could come thinking, I might want to go down this path. What kind of coursework would I need? So, as you probably know, to teach in any particular subject area, you have to have a content level, either degree or experience. So, for instance, a math teacher is either taking a ton of math classes or has a math degree. Yeah. So, part of it at high school level is about, do you have the right degree to fit a content area? But I do think that the best teachers really focus more on teaching than their content, right? Yeah. So you'll find those commonalities among really good teachers. They do a lot of things that really are similar. If you want to teach elementary, you don't actually need that level of content mastery. So a lot of people who want to go into elementary, you when you get to college, you get into an education department program, and it's a more general program, so you can teach just about anything. But it's not you wouldn't have to have a social studies degree or anything.
That's crazy. So that leads me to my next question. Someone had asked what you recommend or what advice you would give to a student wanting to become an educator.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to be an educator, you're probably doing the right things already. You're probably a decent student in high school. You're learning how to study and be a good student. It's good in high school to have experiences maybe as a teacher's aide or as someone who works with the teacher more closely around planning. Yeah. There are teachers who are more than happy to help you with maybe learning a little bit more about how lesson plans work. And then there are kids who do peer tutoring and peer mentoring. Those are all good things to do if you're interested in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so we've gotten a lot of these questions, and this was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year, but do we have assigned parking next year?
We do, and so let me explain a little bit about parking, because there are several questions. I want to make sure I kind of catch all of it. One, assigned parking is really common in high schools as they get big enough where they outgrow their parking, and we just outgrow our parking. And then another question I heard about parking was, is there a plan to create more parking? Yeah, and so on this next bond measure that is we're going to try this fall, it would call for building an auditorium here. That auditorium would take up a little bit of the parking lot next to the music building, but it would turn that entire field behind there into parking. So along there is a plan for that. There really isn't room for more parking than that, but that would be a pretty substantial parking lot, probably the size of the Beckman lot now. Yeah. Would be a whole nother lot there.
That's actually
so that would be helpful.
Pretty nice. You mentioned auditorium, so does that mean we're getting a whole new theater?
The idea would be is if this bond passes, the idea on this bond is to turn our old auditorium into classroom space, gut it, make it a space, maybe some creative spaces that might involve different kinds of learning, and then create a brand new auditorium that would be much larger, probably 2 or 3 times the capacity. That would be next to the music building. And you know those nice stairs that are out by the band building? Yes. Those nice stairs would be the entry to you would then turn left into the new auditorium space.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
So cool. Continuing on, another common question we had received was, why don't we have a pool for our swim team? And I know our swim team goes to Tualatin, so what do you have for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't want to dodge that one. So pools are really expensive propositions, and a lot of schools don't take those on by themselves. Sometimes it's a school and city partnership that does that. There have been groups in the city of Wilsonville that have been working behind the scenes trying to see if the city will go in on creating a sort of a little complex that involves a pool and maybe some meeting spaces. City of Westland's got the same kind of people doing the same thing, and the challenge has been there haven't been quite enough voters in Wilsonville to do it and not quite enough in Westland to do it. And the district is kind of watching that and going like, where's our part in this? But I've heard recently some people saying, what if you had one pool that served both communities that was maybe somewhere in between, like maybe around where Ethan Creek is? Yeah. You could create a pool where both swim teams could use it and both communities could use it. So that's kind of the current thing I'm hearing on that.
All right, so another common question we've been asked, and it's a talk around the whole entire school. So why are some rooms so cold but others are so hot?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So in an earlier question, I was talking about an auditorium, and the reason an auditorium isn't big enough anymore is because the school grows, and the school grows in capacity. And when that happens, schools enlarge, and some of the features just aren't big enough. So the concern in our building right now is we've grown a little bit over time, and it gets harder and harder to heat a building and cool a building. You may have noticed as students that sometimes we have ladders in the hallway. Yeah. Probably more so this year than in some years. That's because we have people chasing that problem, right? They have ladders out, they're getting up there, they're trying to get into the ventilation system, or they're getting up on the roof and they're like, why are we having that trouble? So there are people working on it. The bigger the property, the harder it is to get heating and cooling right, and all I can say is people are actively working on it. We're just not there yet.
So it's being worked on.
It's been looked at and worked on.
So it's a thing. So another question was asked: are built-in snow days a myth?
Yeah, I don't like the term built-in. I don't know if you remember from your earlier years in school. We used to use the term built-in snow days to describe the end of the year is going to be like June 17th. But if there are no snow days, it's going to be June 14th. Yeah. That feels built in because they're already in the schedule. Yeah. We've flipped that now in the last several years, 4 years or so, where we now say the end of the school is June 13th, and if there are snow days, we're going to go farther. We still use the term saying that's built in, and so if you actually saw our calendar, that's what it looks like. It has a date, it says end of the school, and it has 3 circled days afterward that say these are the snow days. And we just plan one for one. If there's a snow day, we add a day. If there's another snow day, we add a day at the end of the year. So we still use the term built-in. I think it was more built-in when we were going back instead of forward. But it's,
it is what it is. Yeah. And we added on.
We added on,
days, so coming up is prom. So we had some questions from juniors who are actually planning prom this year. Why prom must be at the zoo?
Yeah, so that's a hard one. I've talked to lots of kids about this, and it's a challenge. So you will remember, the senior class definitely will remember that there's a change in security at our school from when we first got here, right? So a few years ago, we punched a hole in the office door so that you now have to come through there because we lock doors. We now lock doors better than we used to, right? It used to be that we just weren't as consistent in locking doors. Now we lock them all the time, and you have to come through there. That's a security fix. That's a security change, and that's just because of heightened sense of security that we all have around schools. And all of the schools in our district are doing that. So one area where we were not feeling very secure was prom. Right? So our police go with us to prom, and when they were scouting out the last couple of proms prior to the zoo, they were just saying, yeah, this is secure, but then we were at prom the last time that it was in the city, and we had some issues with people who were not associated with our prom, who were out around our prom and hanging out in the front, and we're like, you guys need to get away. And it was just, and our police were like, we don't love that. Everything was safe, everything was fine, but we don't like that situation. And being at the zoo is a safer venue. They have security. It's away from the city. People can still go have dinner and all that, and then come. So it's a security issue. And one of the questions I saw was around, can we ever go somewhere else? Yeah. I think after a couple of years of the zoo, I think we're probably going to be ready to say, here's a limit. Here are some places that our police have gone with us and they've scouted it out, and these are probably safe enough. Let's pick from these. Rather than a wide open, we're just going to pick one, right? So it'd probably be a little bit more limited, but we're going to want our police involved in saying, what venues do you feel good about coverage?
It's all about being safe. And it's a great venue anyways. Yeah. And I heard prom will probably be there in the next 2 to 3 years after, right?
Excuse me. I don't know, because I won't be here that long. But But so I think right now we have a plan for the next year. I don't know about after that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
But I mean, we're willing to have a discussion about like in last year and this year, we just kind of, and part of this was kind of a district agreement too. We're taking this over. We're going to do this. It kind of felt to the students like we just stole it, but.
But it's for the students, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then to finish us off, one of our last questions is, what is your favorite thing about Wilsonville High School?
Yeah, that's a hard one. This is my 8th year at Wilsonville High School, and I have really appreciated a couple things. One, there's a really strong sense of community here. I like to tell people when they ask me about Wilsonville High School, this is the 4th high school I've worked in Oregon, and this is the one that has the strongest connection to the community. Like our community really feels like this is our high school, right? And so if I'm down the street talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, you work at the high school? Oh, I know people there." Like they really feel connected to high school. Another thing that I think is really strong here is the way our kids care about our kids. There's really great sense of caring there. Part of it is because we have some diversity, and you can see every kind of kid in every kind of class, and I think kids really just feel connected to all kids and not just sort of a cliquish, only kids who feel like me. So
Yeah.
I love that.
That's great. Well, that was a great way to finish off our little question thing. Thank you so much, Mr. Shumaker, for being a part of this. And thank you to everyone who entered questions, and I hope they were all answered. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.